Hey there, boys and girls. It's Ralph Garman, and you're listening to Talking Codswallop. Good choice.
Hello, everybody. This is Ming Chen from AMC's Comic Book Man. You might know me from the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast and the I Sell Comics podcast. Listen, I love podcasting. I love talking, but what I really love doing is talking Codswallop.
Hey, I'm Alicia Witt.
I'm Daniel Portman from Game of Thrones. I play Podrick Payne.
I'm Ellipses, and you're listening to the Talking... Okay, I'm Mark Bernard, and you're listening to the Talking Codswallop podcast.
Hey man, it's Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, whose voice you were never used to hearing in the 90s until I started opening it up, man. And that's because I'm a podcaster and you're listening to a podcast, Talking Codswallop, right here, man.
Welcome to this week's Talking Codswallop. I am Gemma. With me today, I have got a fantastic cartoonist, writer, he's an editor, he does all sorts of things, and met him previously at London Film and Comic Con in 2019, I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, when he used an invisible lasso and pulled me over over to his table. So I'm really interested in hearing what this guest has got to say about his career. So please welcome to the show, David Leach.
Hello, Gemma. Nice to meet you again.
Yeah, nice to meet you again too. How have you been since I last saw you?
Well, I don't know about you, but I spent most of 2020 indoors.
Yep, me too.
Yeah. So I had a funny, well, I say funny, back in 2019, I consider it to be one of the best years of my life. I had an absolutely wonderful time. I celebrated my 30th wedding anniversary. I went to Barbados for a family holiday. I went to New York Comic Con and San Diego Comic Con. I'd never done those two before. It was just wonderful. But then sadly at the end of 2019, I had a terrible fall and destroyed my left knee. And
oh no.
Yeah, I ruptured all four of my quad tendons, which is what keeps your kneecap in place.
Oh.
So all four of them burst simultaneously. And so I had to have a surgery to reattach them. So I spent the first 11 weeks of 2020 at home. I couldn't get anywhere. And I returned to work for 1 week just in time for the lockdown.
Oh, no.
So the weird thing was that I was actually prepared to be stuck at home. So it's not been that much of a problem for me, 2020. It was but very strange to go from what I consider to be the best year of my life to being, as the rest of us have had to suffer, 2020, which was a very strange year, wasn't it?
A very, very strange year. And yeah, I know a lot of people are sort of thinking, oh, yay, 2021 and all that, but it's gonna still be 2020 until all of this is over, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
at least there's hope on the horizon. I mean, we've got the vaccines now.
Yep.
And I think that's great. I mean, like, amazingly, MCM have just announced that they're going to be running 2 conventions this year.
I know. I just saw that email. Yeah. It's Birmingham and London, I
know,
isn't it?
Very exciting. Yeah. So because I tell you, I really miss conventions. I mean,
yeah.
I was doing about 13, 14 a year. And I have to say, I really miss doing them. I mean,
yeah, I can agree with that, definitely, and understand it as well, because from a personal point of view of visiting Comic-Cons, that's one of the big things that I've missed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's meeting people. I mean, you know, I met you at a convention. I mean, yep. I really enjoy that whole thing of selling your wares. I mean, when I'm there, I always just do my own work. I don't work for, you know, I'm not there on Titan business. I'm there doing my own stuff. So I love that interaction with, and selling my wares to people. I get a real kick out of that. It's immensely satisfying and fun.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can definitely understand that as well, because although I've got from the other side of it, because obviously I'm there from a sort of promotional point of view as well, because I'm there as like press in some ways.
Yeah.
So I take, you know, I don't consider myself actually press, you know. We don't report the bad stuff. We only report the good.
Oh, well.
But yeah, it's like trying to get the podcast name out there and get people interviewed on there, which can be quite daunting. Especially, it's not so bad when it's like people on the stalls because, you know, majority of the time people want to talk about their projects, like obviously I experienced with yourself.
Yeah.
But, when it's cosplayers, you know, they are normally quite nervous people or shy people, you know, and it's quite hard. And I'm quite shy as well. So it's hard to kind of, although I come across as bouncy and bubbly, when I'm not sure about a situation, then I can be quite shy as well. So it's one of those things. It's kind of like you're putting yourself out there, but really, you know, like trying to overcome any of your own demons as well, I suppose, isn't it? So.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, when I do a convention, I put on a persona anyway, so I go into manic sales mode. So I don't really care. I mean, my attitude is I'm never going to see these people again. I'm just trying to sell my comics. So what I want to do is entertain them, make them laugh. I always find that because I got a whole sales patch I do for one of my comics, and I use it to sort of break the ice and everything. And I usually find that if I can make someone laugh 3 times, they'll buy a comic off me. So I've got the same sales pattern which I give to everybody when they come up. I show them through one of my comics, and I've got gags that I do for that comic, and that will get at least one laugh out of them. And then from there it's I know when I've hooked them. So I go in there with a persona on. So I don't really care what happens. I can just be as manic as I want. The people who are my friends who are there, they know me, so they know what's going on. But the rest of the time, I'm just talking to punters. So my only mission is sell my wares. And I don't get nervous because for me, life's just too short. I don't want to be nervous. I sort of, it's like, I've always thought, because I'm a cartoonist, that your artwork is an extension of you, or at least in my case, it's an extension of me. So my cartoons tend to be, as you've seen, they're loud, they're manic, and they're in your face. So I like to present that as my persona.
Yeah.
I don't worry about what people think of me, you know, because it doesn't bother me, you know.
No, and that's very, very good. Yeah, definitely. And you definitely came across that way when I met you first as well.
I'm doing my job then. I know you remembered me, so that's good. So I'm doing my job.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remembered you. Yes, definitely. And to be honest, unfortunately, I couldn't buy a copy of your comic.
Right.
I know.
I'm turning the interview off right now.
I know. No, but I couldn't at the time because I was probably one of the only people that turned up to a Comic-Con really poor and didn't have any money with me.
I remember you saying that to me. I do remember. Yeah. Yes.
I definitely would have, though.
Well, you can do it now. I can put it in an envelope and send it to you.
Oh, all right. I'll do that then. I will do that. I'll email you later.
Excellent. Right.
No, but so we should get on to your comics. So, obviously, you've got one of them, which is Psycho
Gran. Psycho Gran.
God, I'm sorry.
Teeth woman.
Psycho Gran.
Yes. I do 2 Psycho Gran comics. I do Psycho Gran Versus, which is basically Psycho beating up various comic book and movie characters.
Yeah.
Invariably it means people being punched or kicked in the genitalia, which is genuinely, I find, very funny. I never get bored of drawing that. And then the other one I do is called Psycho Gran Comic Capers Cavalcade. And what that is I do a cartoon for David Lloyd. David Lloyd's got his own digital comic called Aces Weekly.
Okay.
And Psycho's been going in that since the first volume. So it's he brings out, I think, a volume every month. And I've been in there since the very first volume back in 2000 and I think it was 12 or 13. I think I've been doing it. And so what I do is once it's been there, I then put it into comic form and then I sell them at conventions. So I've done 3. Oh, that's the sad thing about 2020 was I was about to launch issue 3 of Psycho Gran Versus at Dublin Comic Con last year, and then it got cancelled a week to go. Which is a great shame. So I got a whole box of issue 3s ready to go. So I've got 3 issues worth of Psycho Gran Versus, and I've done 2 issues worth of Comic Capers Cavalcade, but I've got enough material for 3rd issue of that one. So that's 2 Psycho Gran comics. And then I do my other comic, which is my autobiographical comic. So I've always hated autobiographical comics. I think they're dreadfully self-indulgent, and I don't think most cartoons have led a life nearly interesting enough to warrant an autobiography. That's just me. I mean, I'm sure there's some great ones out there. I just am bemused by them. So I decided to do my own.
Fair enough.
Because I've led a genuinely very exciting life. So I've done this comic called David Leach Conquers the Universe.
Yep.
And I've actually, that's the other thing, was I spent 2020, I actually drew the third issue of that. I wrote and drew the third issue of that. So I got furloughed for 11 weeks and decided I was going to spend the time drawing a comic. So I did the third issue. So that's going to be coming out hopefully this year. So yeah, those are my 3 comics I think I got out at the minute. Yeah, those 3. So that's it. That's what I do. That's what I does.
Yes, what you does. So, with regards to how it all started, because I love an origin story, so, and I know obviously you've got your autobiography out there at the moment.
Oh, yeah, it's all true. That's what I forgot. Thank you. That's what I was going to say. My autobiography is completely true because it's things like the time I defeated Godzilla. It's the time I went into outer space, fought an alien, and met my wife. And the third issue's what happens in the third? Oh no, but it's all. And the other great thing is it's published by a company called All True Comics. It's co-published by All True Comics and Dead Universe Comics. Dead Universe is a comic shop in Aylesbury run by a fabulous man called Ian Hine, who's got his own comic shop, and he prints my comics for me, which is great. But it's also published by All True Comics, and their motto is "We never lie." So every word in my comic is absolutely true because it's published by All True Comics, and they never lie. So there we are. That's what makes my autobiography exciting, is that I've actually gone into outer space. I've actually fought an alien in outer space, and I've defeated Godzilla. So, that's what makes it exciting. It's not your run-of-the-mill, ooh, I'm a troubled cartoonist trying to find his way in the world. So there we are. Anyway, you want my origin story? Yoink.
Yeah, it was sort of like what inspired you to sort of start drawing and, write comics, and what was your inspiration, really?
Well, you can see on the Skype caller behind me that I'm sitting in my library. So in this library, which you can only see 2 walls of it, obviously it's a room, so there's 2 more rooms. Every single square inch of this room is filled with comic books.
I can see that, definitely.
And I tell this story too often, but this is absolutely true. If I was to reach up here, just above me, this shelf here that I'm sat next to, this is my shelf of pre-1980 British annuals. So I've got annuals that go from the Battle, because it's obviously alphabetized. It goes from Battle all the way down to Whizzer and Chips. And then, so I could reach up here and I could pull down my Beano annual from 1975 when I was 11.
Yeah.
And that's one of the 3 books that inspired me as a kid. Now, behind me on the wall there is a whole row of Giles annuals. I'm a huge fan of Giles, the cartoonist, an absolutely genius cartoonist. I've got almost an entire run of Giles annuals, and I could pull the Giles annual from there that inspired me as a kid. And then on that same wall behind me is a Tintin book, which is Tintin and King Otto's Scepter, which was given to me when I was 6 years old. And I have, as long as I can't remember a time in my life when I wasn't obsessed with comics. I just always loved them.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why. My mum always says that I was always making up stories, and that's true. I always loved stories, and I think that when I first got the King Otto's Scepter, I couldn't read it then, and so I made up my own story. And when I got when I actually could read it properly, I was disappointed to read the real story because my story was much more exciting.
Yeah. It's
only later on when I read it again that I realized how good it was. But back then it was like, oh, is that the story? Blimey, that's not what I thought. So anyway, I've always been obsessed with comics. I love the idea of telling a story with pictures and words. It just absolutely appeals to me. So all through my life, so when other people would dream of being train drivers or rocket scientists or brain surgeons, all I ever wanted to do was draw comics. And I don't know where it came from, but it's just been with me my whole life. So all through school, I just want to draw comics, and the funny thing was that my careers advisor convinced me that I should get a proper job. He said, you can always draw comics, but get yourself a proper job. So at the time, I'd worked for Ryman's at the Stationers as a Saturday job, and they were happy to put me on their management training program. So that was going to be my career path, which is I was going to leave college, leave school, and go straight into working for Ryman's. And this is true. My life's full of strange little events that happened, which basically rescued me from disaster. So about 2 months before I left school, I went to my mum and I said, I can't do it. I've got to go to art college. I don't want to go and work in Ryman's. And she said, well, are you sure? I said, yes. So I'd missed the application dates by yonks. So she walked across the road to my local. I at the time my parents lived opposite the local art college, so she walked in there and got me an interview the next day, and I got a place to go to art college. So
Wow!
I know, I was very lucky. I was incredibly lucky. So I went to art college, and then that was it really. I went to art, did the usual, the lower diploma, then the higher diploma, blah blah blah, and then after 4 years of college, I started taking my portfolio around. And it's the usual thing. Back in this was the good old days before the internet, so you could actually phone people up, make an appointment, go and show them your portfolio. One of the people I got in contact with was a very famous cartoonist called Mel Kalman. He used to do a little pocket cartoon in newspapers called Love Is.
Okay. Oh, it's with those little figurines that.
Not that one. No, I know the one.
Okay.
Yeah, I might be wrong about what it's called. In fact, what I'll do is, as I'm talking to you, I'll look it up on the internet,
Okay.
and tell you what the strip was called because it's part of the story. So at the time, he had an art gallery in Lamb's Conduit Street in London, and I went to see him and I showed him my work and said, "Look, I like your work." He says it's good fun, but I can't give you anything. I don't have anything. There's nothing I can do. But I've got a friend who's an animator, and he runs a studio, and I think you should go and see him. So he said his name is Bob Godfrey. Now, Bob Godfrey is the creator of Rhubarb and Custard and Henry's Cat.
Okay.
So I then got his telephone number, and so I phoned up Bob Godfrey's studio, got through to his secretary, and it was like, "Can I speak to Bob Godfrey, please?" And she said, "Hang on a minute." Then she came back. She says, "Can I ask you who it is, please?" And I said, "Yeah, it's David Leach." And basically Mel Cameron's told me that he should see me. And she was like, "Oh, right. Okay, hang on." So then the phone goes dead. And then suddenly Bob's on the phone. And he was like, "Hello?" I said, "Hello." And he goes, "Your name's David Leach." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "And apparently Mel Cameron says I should see you." And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you better come and see me then." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So there we are. So I'll go and see Mel. I go and see Bob, and I show him my work. And he goes, "I like your work. It's great fun, but I've got nothing for you, but I'll bear you in mind." And there we are. That was it. So that was in September. And then on Christmas Eve, this is all true, by the way. None of this is made up. On Christmas Eve, I get a phone call from a drunk man. "Hello? Hello? Oh, hello. Listen, are you still looking for a job?" "Yeah." "Great. Come and see me January the 2nd. Have a great Christmas." Put the phone down. I was like, bloody hell. So January the 2nd, I go into London, but Bob had a studio in Neal Street, 56, I think it was Neal Street. So, and he was up on the 3rd floor. So I arrived there, Christmas, 2nd of January, 1987. I buzzed the door. It was only him. He was up on the top floor. I walked all the way up, and I got there, and he looked at me up from his drawing board, and he went, "Who are you?" I went, "I'm David Leach." And he went, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, you phoned me up and offered me a job." And he goes, "Did I? When was that?" I said, "Christmas Eve." And he went, "Oh." He looked around the studio, and he went, "Well, that drawing board's free. You can have that one." And that's how I got my first job in comics. And basically what he did was he got me to draw Henry's Cat, which is the cartoon he was animating at the time for ITV. And Henry's Cat would appear in the News of the World newspaper, the Sunday supplement. And he appeared in the Halifax Savers magazine, and it appeared in Button's comic. And I'd be given a script, and I was sent away, and I'd have to draw in his style and draw Henry's Cat. And then he would ink me. Then I would do the colouring. And then it'd be sent off to be printed. And that was my first job as a cartoonist.
Ah.
Just and after a year, I went freelance. And then I ended up on, back in those days, you could actually, the government, weirdly enough, wasn't run by a bunch of utter scumbags as it is currently. And they had this thing called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme. And if you had £1,000 in your bank account, they would sponsor you for a year, and you'd get double the dole to actually help get your business off the ground. So what you would do is you'd arrange with your bank to have a loan of £1,000 just for the purposes of getting this grant. So that's what I did. My local bank put £1,000 into my account. I couldn't touch it. And I got sponsored by the government. And what that would mean is that every few months, somebody from the government would come around and check out to see what I was doing. So for a while, I was the country's only government-sponsored cartoonist.
That's interesting. That's quite an achievement. It's almost like you should get an award for that, shouldn't it?
I did. I got paid for a year to draw comics, so that was brilliant.
Well, there you go. That's brilliant. After
that, it's just the usual of any cartoonist. I mean, back then I didn't know that people got paid to write comics. I assumed that because this is the thing. I always wanted to do humor. I wasn't interested in doing serious comics, so I assumed that you wrote and drew your own stuff. So I knew I wanted to do this. Now, when I was working at Bob, there's a kids comic that launched called Oink, which is a very famous comic. And when I saw Oink, I knew instantly I had to be in Oink. I just had to be in it. So I'd also created a character called Psycho Gran at that point.
Yeah.
And so I sent Psycho Gran off. And I didn't know back then, this was published by IPC. Back then, I assumed everything came out of King Reach Towers. What I didn't know was that Oink was the first comic to be actually done from Manchester and then sent to London. So it was done completely autonomously from IPC. So I sent my samples off to IPC, and I got contacted by Bob Painter, who was the group editor of all the kids comics. So I went to see Bob, and he said, "Look, I like your stuff. Everyone kept saying I like your stuff, but if you do a job for me, I'll send your work to Oink." So I had to do, I think it was a 4-week pull-out section for 2 characters called Phil Fit and Brad Habit. And I did this pull-out supplement. It was a fitness supplement. And I did that, and they sent my work off to Oink. And then Oink got in contact and said, "Yeah, we love Psycho Gran." And that was it. I was away. So I drew Psycho Gran in Oink, and I drew a couple of other things. And then Oink went under, which was a great shame. And then I'd made friends with some other cartoonists. One of them, we collaborated on a strip called The Driver. That was a cartoonist called Banks who drew Bert the Alien. And we sent it off all over the place. And we always found it very hard to land to get The Driver. And then a new comic came out, which was called Toxic. And we sent The Driver off to Toxic. And Pat Mills and Kevin Neal absolutely loved it, thought it was amazing. And so we got The Driver into Toxic, which was for us, it was amazing. It was our break, and we were absolutely thrilled. So we did The Driver, and then I went away and did a strip called The Dinner Ladies from Hell, which is also in Toxic. And then we were working on a sequel to The Driver when sadly Toxic folded.
Oh.
Now, the weird thing was that our work got seen by people. So a Marvel US editor saw our Driver stuff and said, "Would you guys like to do a comic for us, for Marvel? I'm the editor of a comic called The Toxic Crusaders, and I think you guys could do a good job. Would you write it for us?" So we went away, we wrote up some ideas, we sent this to them, and he loved it. So we landed one issue of The Toxic Crusaders. And then he said, "Listen, do you want to draw it too?" And we went, "Yeah, we'd love to." So we ended up writing and drawing a Marvel comic. So
amazing.
For me, it was fantastic. So I actually wrote and drew issue 7, I think it was issue 7 of The Toxic Crusaders. And then they said, "Listen, we absolutely love what you've done. Would you like to do a 4-book miniseries for us?" And we went, "Oh my God, would we?" So he went away and he wrote an idea, and we did all the covers, and they loved it. And then he said the same thing. "Listen, do you want to draw it?" And we said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And then we're doing that. And then 1 week before our deadline on the first issue, Marvel US collapsed and they went into bankruptcy.
No.
And the first thing was they cancelled their entire line of TV related titles, including us. And we lost our editor, and we were paid for the work we'd done, but that was it. So we drew the first issue. It never got published.
Oh.
Basically, by that point, my working partnership with Banks came to an end. And I had to get a job because basically British comics were collapsing. Comics were everywhere, just dying. That was it now. It was the death nail. And it was a very bad time. And I still just wanted to do humor. Now, the weird thing was at the same time of doing all this, I was also doing things like coloring for Marvel UK. So I was coloring all their comics for them. Not all of them,
Okay.
So I went to see the editor-in-chief at Marvel UK, which was Paul Neary, and said, "Can I have a job, please?" And he went, "Okay. Why?" So I said, "I've been working, blah, blah, blah." And I had another interview with the publisher, and I got a job at Marvel UK as an assistant editor. And I swore, that's it. I've had it with drawing comics. I'm just going to edit now. And so I then spent the next God knows how many years. I think that was 1993. I then worked for 8 years during editing comics, either freelance or, I worked for Marvel for 5 years, and then I went freelance again. And then I decided 2000 to go back to college and retrain as an animator. So I went back to college and I retrained as a 2D drawn animator at St. Martin's. I got a postgraduate distinction, and then I got snapped up by the games industry. I ended up working for Codemasters as an animator, which ended up being 4 of the most miserably uncreative years of my life, which was very depressing. And then I did some interesting things though. These are very old games, but I ended up being a voice artist for 3 games. So
okay.
I used to be, Codemasters used to do a game called LMA Football Manager, and I was the voice of one of the managers. So if you were playing the game and you were using the manager sort of encouragement button, you'd hear me shout things like, "Get it up the front, 4-2, pass the ball, and that was me. So I did that, and I was also the level 1 boss of a game called Toca Race Car Driver. And the idea was it was the first racing game that had a story, and you played the same character, and you played him through his career. And after the end of the first year of the game, I challenge you to a race. So I phone you up and say, hey, do you think you can beat me? If you do, you get to win my car. And so you race against me, and then if you beat me, I go, well done, and I give you the keys to my Mini. So I was the voice of that. And then I'm not too sure, but I think I was a character in Colditz. They had a game called Colditz, and I think I was a character in that too. But definitely I was an LMA football manager, and definitely I was the voice in Toca Race Car Driver, which I'm quite chuffed about.
Yeah, that's really good. I was going to say, is it different doing the animation for a computer game compared to like a comic?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, so I trained as a 2D animator, which meant I drew it. I drew everything. And then I got picked up by the games company. I had to learn how to animate in 3D. So the thing about doing drawn animation is that you're completely in control. The thing about 3D animation, or the way it used to be, was that the computer would animate between the points that you had done.
Okay.
So when you're drawing, and also a computer will always find a curve. It won't do. So whereas I was a very good, strong, what they call key-to-key animator. So I do strong key-to-key poses and then animate between those two poses. I was good at doing that. I found it very hard to actually change and actually be able to animate using the computer, because for me the computer would take away what I wanted to. I just couldn't get the hang of it. It just me and it were never suited. I ended up mainly storyboarding for them. The other thing I did I animated all the cutscenes. So I would take mocap footage and blend them together and then animate camera tracks and all that sort of stuff. And we'd have to animate the characters. And the thing, we had sliders so we could actually make their mouths make shapes. So I did all the voice shapes so that all the footballers were swearing. So if you're watching the cutscenes, you would see them shout, that made me laugh. I thought it was very funny, but I got into trouble for that, and I had to change it all because I had them all swearing their heads off on that day. And you could read their lips, and it's like, what did he just say about my mother? So anyway,
so that was your rebellious time then.
Well, I think what it was, I'm someone who's I don't necessarily think it's a good trait, but I have a naughty, mischievous part of me, and I really should keep it in check, but frankly, I can't help myself. When the mist descends, I just give in to the monster.
Well, I think it's fun to have a mischievous side. So, you keep it up.
No, it's got me in major trouble in the past, though. I can't tell you some of the things it's got me into, but I have had some major shit come down to me for the things I've done. So okay. I wouldn't recommend it to the weak-hearted.
Okay. Well, there we are, people. Don't do it.
Don't do what I do. Definitely don't do what I do. Anyway, just to bring it up to date, blah, 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 blah. So I left Codemasters, and then I ended up in the single best job of my entire life, and it was bliss. I got a job with a London-based animation company, storyboarding. And they were doing a new show, and I was storyboarding on that, and it was just wonderful. And one day, I let slip that I was going home. They asked what you're up to, and I said, I'm going home to do some writing. And he went, you write as well? I said, yeah, I'm a cartoonist. Of course I do. And they were like, oh, amazing. Listen, do you want to write some of our shows for us? So I ended up storyboarding, writing shows for them. And that was terrific. And all I would do every single day was go into the office and just draw or write. And that's all I did for a year. And it was just total 100% bliss. I loved it. It was so wonderful that I didn't actually like going home. I would have happily worked all night long. I just adored it. It was just pure creative release, and it was total bliss. And then they made me a development producer, so the idea was I'd go away and come up with concepts for new shows and so, and it was just going like great guns. So I went from being a freelancer to being on the books, and it was wonderful. And then sadly, 1 month into me as a development producer, my boss took me out for a walk on the Thames and said, I'm really sorry, but we've run out of money. And so I lost that job, and as luck would have it, the week I lost that job, Titan Comics, or Titan Books at the time, advertised for a graphics novel editor for their book department. So I applied, got the job, and I've been there now for 14 years, although now I work in Titan Comics. And I'm now Titan's senior comic editor, a creative editor. I'm senior creative editor at Titan Comics, where I oversee things like Blade Runner 2029. It was Blade Runner 2019, but we just started the second year. I'm doing a second Blade Runner title called Blade Runner Origins. I do Rivers of London. I do all sorts of shades of magic. I do collections of old vintage stuff like Flash Gordon and Mandrake the Magician, Dan Dare, Peanuts. I'm doing Peanuts collections currently. So when I'm not doing that, I started drawing. I should have told you. Back in 2012, I suddenly got the urge to draw again. I hadn't drawn for about 8 years, and I suddenly had to start drawing again. And weird enough, it was Psycho Gran that came back to me. She came out of retirement, and I started drawing her again, just for myself. And one day my boss saw what I was doing, and he loved what I was doing. And so Titan published 2 issues of Psycho Gran as a digital comic. So you can actually get that on Comixology.
Okay.
And when that sort of snowballed from there, and then David Lloyd got in contact and asked me to work on Aces Weekly. I genuinely thought, this is true, that he got me mistaken with Gary Leach. So I didn't tell him, and I was thinking any minute now he's going to find out that he's got the wrong Leach. And so I drew Psycho Gran. And when Aces launched, I remember David introducing me, and I suddenly realised from what he was saying was that he knew my work, and that was such an amazing thing to discover that a cartoonist whose work I deeply admire actually liked my own work. Was just like, wow. So anyway, since 2012, I've been doing my own comics, and I've done all this stuff. So that's my entire career in a nutshell. So in answer to your original question, which was what inspired me, I haven't the foggiest. I think it was those 3 books. It was Beano, Tintin, and Giles. Those 3 inspired me, and then I think also what inspired me was every time someone told me no, it made me want to do it even more.
That's good.
Yeah,
because it kind of did when you said towards the beginning there that the like your teacher or advisor or whatever said to you to try and get a proper job.
Yeah.
It's like so annoying when people are in the artistic line and people, and people outside of it always have that sort of responses. It really gets on my nerves. Art is and can be a profession. Some people can't always do it. My mum personally is an artist, and she does sell some stuff, but she does it more as a hobby than proper selling it as a job. But there is a market out there for art, and I think there should be a government grant, especially now, because it's the kind of thing that makes people happy, isn't it?
Well, I think you're completely right. I'm never going to argue that, because I think art is important. I mean, if you look at, for example, every single thing in your room, every single thing in my room has been designed and created by somebody,
Yeah.
And I think it's a great shame that we have a current government who recently ran a campaign which invited dancers and artists to give up and retrain as maybe in tech.
Yeah.
Why don't politicians go and retrain as a useful member of society? Like I don't know, I can't think of anything more useful. But you know what I mean? It's the attitude that the arts don't mean anything, that it's unnecessary. I will say this though, that I think being creative can be a curse as well as a blessing. If you're genuinely creative, and I think it's wonderful, it's exceedingly hard to make a career out of it. I don't know if I'm not going to say lucky, because I think that sounds a bit arrogant. I haven't been lucky because I've worked at it, but I have been fortunate enough that my creativity has helped me have a career that spanned over 30 years. I mean, that's unusual.
Yeah.
But I have had to turn my hand at doing things, but I do believe that creativity, if you can harness your creativity, it can help you through life. It is sort of, it's enabled me to go from being, a cartoonist and a writer to being an editor, to being a storyboard artist, to being, to writing, animated shows. Yeah, it's enabled me to do all these things, that they're all part of the whole. Sometimes people ask me, how do you jump from project to project? And I don't understand the question, because for me, it's just part of being creative. If you're creative, you turn your creative energies to whatever problem is in front of you. You're a creative problem solver. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and I think, like you said, lucky. I know, like, obviously you have worked hard at it, but I think also lucky in the sense that you, at times, throughout what you said earlier, you've been at the right place at the right time.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I always, whenever I do portfolio reviews and people say, how do you break into comics? I say, it's actually really easy. There's only 2 things you need. And then if you got those 2 things, you'll be fine. I said, the first thing is what you just said, which is always be in the right place at the right time. And the second thing is, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yes.
And they always tut. And I think, well, actually, both those things are true to a degree. And the thing, because you make your own luck, you being at the right place at the right time what that really means is that you're able to convince someone you're talking to of your abilities.
Yeah.
That's what I said earlier on about, if for example, if you're a cartoonist, you sell your stuff. I used to go in and do almost stand-up routines in my portfolio because I knew, and I still do, you make somebody laugh, they remember you. There are 1,000 better cartoonists out there, 10,000 better cartoonists out there. There are 10,000 better writers than me. There are always going to be people who are better than you. It doesn't matter though. What you have to do is make yourself unique, and you've got to make sure the people you're talking to remember you. And that's what I think is important, that you develop a link with the person who might be able to offer you work. You make them like you. You become you give them something which other people don't have. And I think I always find it surprising in my industry that there are certain cartoonists and artists and writers I've met who are absolute dicks, just obnoxious gits. And I think, well, I'm not going to work with you. And I'm in a position to give people work. I work with people whose work I admire and I like, but also people I know I can actually work with. The last thing I want to do is to lumber myself with an artist who's got such an inflated opinion of themselves that they're completely useless to work with. And I can't believe how many of them are out there, that they just blast through life. I'm stopping there before I say too much.
Fair enough. But it kind of brings me to my next sort of question in a way, because, with regards to sort of collaboration and things like that, do you quite like collaborating with other people, or do you feel that you work better when it's your own words and your own artwork on the page? Well,
remember, like my day job, I'm an editor. So being an editor is all about collaboration. I have to put together art teams. So I go away and I'll find, a project I'll get. I go away and I find the right artist and the right writer. And I put them together. So I think that being an editor is extremely collaborative. And I think it's a great shame that a lot of comics consider the role of an editor to be nothing more than just a postboy passing stuff along. And I think that a proper editor, given the rights, is invaluable on the comic, because we're not trying to stamp our own authority onto it, but we can offer insights that the writer and the artist maybe don't see because they're too close to the project.
Yeah.
So I think in that respect, being an editor, it's all about collaboration. You're keeping the whole thing running. You've got to. When it comes to doing your own stuff, when I was working with banks, that was an extraordinarily exciting creative process. Two people writing together. It's a very hard thing to do. Not many partnerships survive. There's always going to come a point where you drift away. But when it's working properly, it can be very exhilarating. It is frustrating because it's like in relationships, which is just another collaboration. Everything about these things, it's learning what to give up. It's learning to surrender stuff that you might. I suddenly had the right word and I just lost it. It fell out of my head. It's sort of knowing, you've got to give things up. You can't have your own way all the time. So it's compromise. So when you're working with other writers, it's about compromise. If you're working on a project together, though, it can be very exhilarating, and you quickly find out your strengths and weaknesses. There's things that you'll do that your partner can't do and everything. I've never worked with another artist with my script. So I've always written and drawn my own stuff. So I've written for other artists. Oh, that's not true. Yeah, I've written for other artists, but that's different. So I've written for things like, I wrote the Wallace and Gromit newspaper strip. I wrote Ren and Stimpy and Spider-Man. I've written that sort of stuff. That's different. I mean, if I'm writing scripts for someone else's character, I'm not that precious, because I'm a writer for hire. I'm doing my job. I'm getting paid. I don't really care a great deal. No, that's not true. I do care, but I'm also a strong believer in if the artist has been hired by someone else, the reason they've been hired is the editor thinks they're good. So I'm not going to start getting all snotty and how dare you draw my scripts this way. It's their interpretation of it, So it's sort of, if I've done a good enough job with my scripts, then I'm one of these sort of people that if I'm doing a 6-page script for another artist, they'll get a 12-page script because I'll go into detail and explain a panel and break it down for them because I want to make sure I've given them enough information. Some writers don't. Some writers do a very, very short script, 1 page of script for 1 page of artwork. I think it all depends. So I feel like I've rambled off.
You're absolutely fine. Like I said before we started recording, this podcast is called Talking Codswallop. Our listeners hear me and obviously James normally, but he sends his apologies for not being here, by the way. But
he's not well.
Yeah,
not good.
He's too poorly at the moment. But yeah, with regards to the listeners, they hear us speak every week, so it's really nice. We want you to have the platform this week.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, so, okay.
I mean, if we're getting on to like 3 hours, I might have to nip it in the bud.
I like it too. I mean, I think let's go for an hour. See how we go for an hour.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, collaborating. So yeah, what I was going to say. Yeah, so basically, I do care about what the artist does, but I'm not precious about it. I think because, you know, what's important about a comic strip isn't the way you describe a panel; it's how the artist draws the panel. What's important when you're writing a script is that there's enough room for your balloons filled with your words. I once worked with a writer who I'm not going to name, who, when I asked him if he was happy for me to do a script edit, said, "I'm not changing a single word. I've sweated over every letter." And I thought, wow, that's not a good attitude to have.
Yeah.
That's not a good attitude to have. You know, there should be room for
change and progress.
Collaboration, yeah. I'm not saying that all my suggestions are good, but you should at least be open to reading what I'm suggesting. So when it comes to my own scripts for other people, I don't mind what they do as long as they have enough room for my lovely words.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And like, sort of, I've got two separate questions which I don't have any personal knowledge of. So I was going to say, with regards to when you're in your process of creating a comic, do you tend to do the artwork first, or is the writing first?
For me, because the way my brain's wired, I do both simultaneously. So when I was doing the third issue of David Leach Conquers the Universe last year, I thought I started one of my notebooks, just started doodling out all the panels, and I thought, oh, this is fine. I'll do this. I don't need to write a script. So when I'd done the other two issues, I'd actually written full scripts for myself. So even though I was drawing it, I was doing like a 45 page script for a 22 page comic. I was putting that much detail, even just for myself, because I wanted to approach the project as if I was writing it for another artist. So I used that mentality. For issue 3, I just thought, I don't care. I just want to get on with it. So I tried just to storyboard the whole thing, and I was doing it, doodling it out. But I kept redoing the first 10 pages over and over again. And I realized that by cheating, I was actually failing. So what I ended up doing was I ended up thumbnailing out the script as just like quick stick figures, and then writing loads of dialogue. And then I turned that whole thing into a script. Now, what I could do by doing that was that I was able then to actually edit down. So the great thing about writing isn't the initial writing, it's the editing. That's what's actually the fun part, where you condense it. And I think that being an editor, this is the talent I love the most, which is you take. I ended up with a script that if I'd drawn it would have been 48 pages. And I thought, I don't have time to draw a 48 page comic.
No.
I've got to get this comic down to 32 pages. So I had to excise 12 pages. And that was a wonderful experience. You just start cutting out the dead wood, you know. And I've got certain rules that I stick to when it comes to writing it. I believe that you should always start a scene on a new page. Don't start a scene halfway down a page. Start on a brand new page. Never leave a scene if you're going to go back to it. So the idea is don't walk out of a door if you're going to come back into that room. Once you've left that room, you move on to the next thing. So don't go back, okay? Make sure everything's finished. Because a good example would be the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, where there's one scene in a grotto. They actually go back to it 3 times. And it's like, for God's sake, this is so irritating. This becomes very boring.
Yeah.
So for me, I like to keep. I'm a very linear storyteller. I like to keep things slammed down the middle, keep things going, keep the momentum going. So never leave a room. You know, never come back to a room once you've left it, type thing. Blah blah blah. So there's always sort of certain rules that I stick to, and I find the process then becomes that you doodle it out and then you write it. And by writing it, it's actually very liberating. When you're writing down the panels, it enables you to see the picture better in your head in a weird way. So it's a combination of the two things. It's a sense of drawing it and writing it simultaneously. But the end product is that I end up typing the whole thing out. So I've got a proper full script.
Okay.
You know, which I think is important. I want that. Also, I want that artifact. I want to know that that's the script. And then when I print it out, I can make notes on it and I can tweak. And also the weird thing is that once you start drawing it from that point of view, you still make changes. You still, I mean, for me, I'm very plot driven. I need to know the last line of every story I write before I can start writing it. So I usually start with an idea, and then I very quickly think of what the last line is going to be. Now, sometimes that last line might change before I get to the end, but I have to know the ending before I can start. Now, it's interesting because I'm very plot driven, but someone like Stephen King, who I'm a great admirer of, I love Stephen King, he thinks that plot is the enemy of the writer. I'm paraphrasing, but the idea is that you should just let the writing just take you over. But I think that as I'm trained as an editor now, that I can't do that because I know that I've got a certain number of pages to fill. So I aim for a 22-page comic, and I realized that I had too much material for a 22-page comic. And in my head, I went up in 8s because you print in 8s or 16s. And I thought, what's the next number up from 22? And so I went for, I think it was 32. So I went for 10 pages. Well, that was enough because that still works. That's still fine because it doesn't matter. But anyway, so what it enables you to do then is that you're constantly thinking, and by having an actual end in sight, it forces you to edit as you go along, which I think is very important. Too many young cartoonists or modern cartoonists, they're too self-indulgent. They sort of just ramble on. And I think that if they were stricter with themselves and actually edited themselves, I think that they produce better stuff. If you look at modern comics compared to, let's say, comics in the 70s. So I grew up on comics in the 70s.
Okay.
If you look at a copy of the Hulk from the 70s, there's one I always remember where in one issue he has a fight on the Earth, gets shot into space, has a battle in space, then crashes down on Earth and has another battle, all in one 22-page comic. But then, if you look at a modern comic from another Hulk comic, let's say from the 2000s, I remember one whole issue took place in a diner, and all it was talking heads, and nothing happened. And for me, I want there to be action. I don't want a slow-paced comic. I want it to be, because comics can do stuff that I get surprised when people think that comics and films are the same thing. They're not. They're totally different animals. You can do things in comics you could never do in a movie. And the way that you can tell stories in comics is so liberating compared to film. I know that you can do great things with film, but comics give you such an extraordinary canvas to work with. I love it. I mean, I still get tingles. I still get goosebumps about comics. I truly love them, and they've been that's the thing for me, is that they've been a part of my whole life. There's never been a time when I wasn't surrounded by them or making them or reading them. I mean, Jesus, I've got 2 comics to read. I've got 2 books. I bought the new I bought an old Giles annual, volume 7, which I didn't have, and I just picked it up. And over there I've got that's it, Jacobs, Edgar P. Jacobs, who did Blake and Mortimer. There's a wonderful series of books, and I've just got the new one in. So I'm always reading comic books. There's not a day goes by when I don't read them. So they completely obsess me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good. It's good to have a passion, isn't it? Because, like, my big passion is this, podcasting and talking to people. So, that's something, if I could do it for a living, unfortunately, probably likelihood, because there's so many people out there that are doing podcasts, but like you were saying earlier, with regards to like doing your writing and the artwork for comics and stuff, it's quite hard to get your foot in the door with these kind of things. But
but there are ways. I mean, you can always get in contact with your local radio stations. I mean, you've got enough evidence that you can interview people. I've got a friend who writes for a local radio station. I mean, they're always crying out for people. Give it a go. Have a look at your local radios. I think people sort of forget about local radio. It can actually be quite a creative platform.
Okay, yeah,
Check it out.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. That was a big tip. Thank you very much. I will look into it. And my other question was, with regards to, obviously we were talking about your editing process and whatnot, and just what is actually involved in editing a comic, and are there certain guidelines that you need to kind of follow? With regards to all of the PC world stuff that's going on at the moment. And well, not at the moment, it's been going on for ages, hasn't it? But
okay, well, I mean, I learned how to be an editor at Marvel UK, and there was a certain house rules that Marvel UK used, and I think that those are rules I still stick by. One of the ones I absolutely love, which is that no speech balloon should have more than 30 words in it. Now, I think that's such a wonderful rule. It's also a great thing if you write a massive long speech balloon and you look at it and you go, okay, can I cut this down to 30 words? That is such a a fantastic tool to be able to do that. If you take what you write and you think, I've just written the best bit of dialogue in the world. It's a shame it's 60 words in one balloon. The reason for this is that if you have too many balloons crammed with over 30 words on a page, your reader's not going to bother reading it.
Yeah.
They'll get bored. It's too much to read. They don't want that. So you want to be able to be as precise or concise as possible. Not precise, but concise as possible. So if you write loads, try and whittle it down. Always try and whittle it down. If you can, why say something in 15 words if you can do it in 10? If you can do it in 10, can you get it down any further? It's actually it's quite fun, but also still retaining the voice. So there's certain rules about that. You know, there's certain ways that there's little things like one of the things that really annoy me in lettering, in amateurish lettering, is that people that use serifed eyes, so eyes that have got, you know, top and bottom. Right, so you use serifed eyes in things, anything other than I. So they'll use it all the way through. So if it was fight, it would be F serifed I GHT. That really winds up. Bad lettering in a comic is awful. There's you know, just terrible. It's one of the sort of things you see a lot in people who, you know, there's that you must notice this in comic conventions. There's a whole cottage industry that's sprung up now of young people making their own comics and selling it to other young people who make their own comics. They're sort of like a self-fulfilling, you know, prophecy.
Yeah.
And the thing is that a lot of them are manga orientated, and I think the reason for that is that you get so many manga artists who draw manga because it's easy to draw. That it's a great shame, because if you look at this wonderful tradition that we have for comics in this country, not just British comics. But even then, I mean, my God, you know, we created the comic form. We created comics before anybody else. And I find it so frustrating. Young people have been inspired by manga. And the weird thing is that we live in an era where everyone goes on about, oh, you mustn't misappropriate other people's cultures. And yet we completely misappropriated manga, which is weird because the Japanese appropriated it from American comics in the first place. The whole reason that we have manga comics is that the Japanese were reading American comics after World War II, and that they were doing these great big round-eyed characters because they were trying to draw Westerners. That's why we have manga. And that's the so weird thing. So you take manga, which was appropriated from the Americans, and now we're appropriating it into this dreadful mishmash of UK or Western manga, which I just breaks my heart, because if you look at the wonderful comics that Europe produces, you look at Hergé and Peter Jacobs and all the rest. Just those two are my favorites. But you look at all the rest. There is such an extraordinary, great school of European cartoonists. Extraordinary. I could pick books off my shelf for hours and show you wonderful artists in Europe. But all these young cartoonists, they don't care about that. They just draw this dreadful manga with like dozens of whiz lines and great big eyes and beads of sweat shooting off them. And it's like, oh, well, you've missed the whole point of comics.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah, I get it.
That's just me. I mean, but listen, that said, there are mangas that I truly adore. I mean, Akira was brilliantly drawn. Gunsmith Girls, I love. There's loads of stuff, loads of mangas. Monster, I got over there a whole stack of Monster, which is a absolutely brilliant 10-part manga. So when it's good manga, I bloody love it, because those guys can draw like you wouldn't believe. But when it's just knockoff manga, and it tends to be doe-eyed, I don't know. I don't want to say any more.
No, that's fair enough. I think it's people jumping. I think the way to sort of sum it up is people jumping on the bandwagon, isn't it? Like, that's the most popular thing at the moment. So we're gonna have an attempt at doing it. You know, it will sell.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, the thing is that what I find frustrating is that they pick up lots of tricks from looking at manga, and they can copy those tricks easily, but they're not. See, that's the thing. It's like when I went to college, you couldn't learn comics. If I went to an art school and they said, "What do you want to do?" and I just want to be a cartoonist, they threw me out. They wouldn't even interview me, okay? Because as far as I was concerned, they said you can't teach comics. And I believe that you can't teach comics. I think what you can do is, if you want to be a cartoonist, you learn by drawing, you know? That you love comics, and so you draw your own comics. That's how you become a cartoonist. What you can learn at college is how to do things like life drawing, which is the single most important talent that any cartoonist needs, is the ability to draw human figures. That's what you need. Everything else is secondary. You can learn that sort of stuff. You can learn how to draw other things. You can learn design and all that sort of stuff, which will help you as a cartoonist. But when it comes to you wanting to draw comics, the best thing you can do, like if you want to be a writer, the best advice you can ever give anybody who wants to be a writer is tell them, write every day. Just write. Put aside 2 or 3 hours a day and just write every single day of your life, and you will get better. You will get better. But all this stuff takes practice. And I think it's like any creative thing takes practice. No one no one is creative. And that's it. Okay. They all have worked at what they've done. And unfortunately, I believe that we live in a society that you've got things like the X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, and everyone believes they're going to get instantly picked up and they don't need to do any hard work. That you look at all the best musicians in the world, they've spent years of their lives honing their skills. They say that it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something. Okay. Many people, I think, just want to cut corners. And so they see manga and manga gives them a chance to cut corners. I'll just copy that. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. And I think that's a great show.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. James wants to know, he sort of sent me a message saying, what's the most rewarding and challenging part of your current job?
The most rewarding is getting my salary check every month, and so I can go and buy things. I will tell you what's rewarding. So I didn't actually end up answering your last question, which was about being an editor.
You didn't, did you?
No, I cunningly I did a politician's trick and sideswiped you. So quickly tell me your question again, and I'll answer that one very quickly for you.
Well, my question was, what's actually involved in editing a comic?
Okay, good, yeah.
And also, what kind of certain guidelines do you have to kind of...
All right. Okay, yeah. So I started with my guidelines. So what's involved in editing a comic? You got to understand that someone like Titan, what we tend to do is pick up licenses. So we pick up licenses. So what we're doing is a license-owned comic. So my job then is to liaise with the license holder on the comic. So it's very important that I have a good relationship with the license holders. So this is very important. So you have to work very closely with the license holder and very closely with the writers and the artists on a project. And you have to make sure that that everything you do is approved by certain different people. So it's a matter of going out and finding, once you get a project, you then find a team, you put them together, you get them approved, and then you work on an idea, you get that approved, and then that turns into a script, you get that approved, and that turns into art. So what you're doing is you're basically you're keeping the machine running. You know, you're sort of you're checking things, you're reading scripts, you're making notes, you send the notes back to the writer. I suggest you do this. I suggest this. Maybe this would work better. You know, you do that sort of stuff. They don't have to always follow what you say, because you're not cutting. It's not set in stone, but you're giving advice. Same thing for the artist. When I work with an artist, I want to see the thumbnails of what they're doing first. I look at the thumbnails. I compare that to the script. If that's good, we then go to pencil stage, get the pencils approved, then get the inks approved, then get it coloured, then get it lettered. So everything is constant, keeping this whole thing going. So it's a very sort of relentless thing, because you're doing this every single month. And I've got what, 4 different comics on the go every single month.
That's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a lot. And you've just got to keep it going. You've got to just keep doing it. So so being an editor, you're doing all sorts of stuff. You're other things you can be. So sometimes you're script editing, sometimes you're storyboarding, or you're making art changes. Sometimes you're writing, for example, all of the stuff that isn't comic strip, you're writing. So all the back cover blurb for all the graphic novels, I write all of that. Sometimes I might have to write features in the back of a graphic novel. So I'm doing bonus material at the back, and I'm doing things like writing biographies of the artist and writers. Or if I'm doing an old collection of vintage stuff, I'm doing whole new articles about stuff. Or I'm commissioning people. I'm finding people to write articles for it. You know, you're working with a designer. You've got to design covers. You've got to, oh my God, there's so many things involved. It's just relentless.
It sounds as though like every day can be different. I mean, obviously there's going to be same sort of things that happen, but you know, there's probably new challenges every day.
It's new challenges every month. So every month, the same challenges come around every single month, and you're sort of, you know, and so that, I think that's the answer. What's it like being an editor? It's a stimulating job. There are other things that you do. One of the things that we do is that if we get a new project, so we get a new license. So for example, several years ago, we got the license to do The Prisoner, and so what you have to do then is you have to convince the license holder that you've got a good idea. So as the editor, or as my job would be to come up with a story idea. So sometimes I used to be asked by my group, the publishing director, David, we need an idea. We want a pitch for this film. So we want you to come up with an idea. And I just go away and come up with an idea. So, for example, one year I came up with an idea which completely combined the entire Jerry Anderson universe into one cohesive story.
Yeah.
And I wrote this epic saga, and it was, and we all loved it, but we couldn't get it approved. It was back when Thunderbirds had just launched again, and they felt it would confuse the brand. And another time I worked to create a universe for all of the old Hammer horror characters. I came up with an idea that brought them all together under one. And so you go away and you write stuff like that. So I did the same thing for The Prisoner, which I went away and I wrote a whole new, the old Patrick McGowan TV show. I went away and I wrote the plot for that, and that was very liberating. I found that very exciting. So that's part of my job as well, is to come up with stories. I mean, I'm always coming up with stories. It's just one of these things I do. I currently today came up with a suggested plot outline for a very famous horror franchise, which I can't name.
Okay.
And that was quite good fun. So I'm doing that. So that.
What's the name of that one?
You almost caught me there. So then your next question was, what's the best thing, was it?
Yeah, what's the most rewarding and also challenging part of your current job?
What's the most challenging part?
Yeah. And you can use that towards your comics as well, if you wanted to. Or you can use it for the comics instead, whichever.
I'm just trying to think about challenging. I mean, everything is a challenge. It's relentless. It's unstoppable. It just goes on and on and on. There's never, it's weird that everyone works towards the end of the year and you think, oh, the end of the year, hooray, a brand new year. But a brand new year is just the same old year, but just back at the beginning.
Different date.
Yeah, different date.
Yeah.
So the challenge.
Or same shit, different smell, as I like to say.
No, absolutely. So I think the challenge is just the same. It's just working. It's just keeping things going. It's just every day is a different challenge. There's different things to worry about. The lettering, the colouring, all sorts of stuff. It's just relentless. The best thing about it, I'm trying to think that there are some times where, I mean, like you do so many books. It's really weird that you sort of you stop looking at them. So the funny thing is that I've done, I don't know how many books I've done now. I really don't know. I can't think of a number. And sometimes once you've sent it off to once it's gone off to print, you don't think about it and you go on to the next project. And the next time you see it will be 3 months later when suddenly someone hands you the printed book. And you go, oh my God, I forgot I did that. And then you look at it. So sometimes I won't look at it. I can't bring myself to look at it. I don't want to, in case I spot something wrong in it. But every now and again, I've got to work on a project which has meant the world to me. And I am so proud of what I've done that it brings tears to my eyes. And for me, one of those was I did an artist edition of the unpublished Prisoner. So it turned out that back in the 70s, Marvel had hired both Gil Kane and Jack Kirby to do The Prisoner. And they both had drawn their own versions of The Prisoner, 2 16-page stories that had never been printed. They just sat in a drawer. We got the rights to do it as part of the whole Prisoner thing. So for me, the satisfaction came in tracking down the artwork. I had to go and find the artwork. So we found the artwork for the Gil Kane very easily. It turned out that one collector in America had all the pages. And that was
okay.
But the artwork for Jack Kirby took me 18 months to track down. Okay, I went through so many hurdles. I kept meeting people who would say, "Oh, I know who's got that. I'll be your in between." And it went on and on, layer upon layer, until finally I tracked it down to an American actor who had bought all of the Jack Kirby. And for me, when he sent me a hard drive with all of the Jack Kirby artwork scanned at 200 meg a page, I cried. It was just wonderful to see it. And when that book was finally published, I was so proud of it. It's a great big book. It's actual size artwork. So I'm holding my hands up for your readers who can't see me. Your listeners who can't see me.
Listeners even, yeah.
So you're talking about a book that's what, 17 inches tall?
Okay.
But for me to do that, I love books. So the idea that I'm making is not just a book, but I'm making something that will last. I'm making something that's got a life that will end up in the British Museum. I've made books that will end up in the British Museum. That for me fills me with real pride. I'm proud of what I've done.
Yeah,
I'm not arrogant about it. I'm not arrogant about it, but I to have made an artifact and leave it behind, and I've done something. And also, one of the great things I found was that when I did San Diego last year and New York Comic Con, I was actually selling these books to people, and that was wonderful. That I would actually convince them to buy a book that I worked on. So that gives me immense satisfaction. In terms of my own work, I tell the story, which is true. I'll tell you three. It's a 3-part answer. So I remember the very first time I saw one of my cartoons published in a book, and I got paid for it. That was such a wonderful feeling that I had been paid for something that I'd written and drawn, and I got money for it. That was incredible, and I felt giddy. And there comes a point when I see my work in print, I still get excited. I still love to see my work in print. It really is. It gets a terrific buzz. So that's the first part of the 3-part answer. The second time I ever felt that was when I went to college and I trained as an animator. Now the funny thing was that when I worked for Bob Godfrey for the first time, he trained me in animation. So he gave me a grounding in animation, and he would give you these things to do. And one of the things he did was he would say, "I'm going to give you 12 random objects, and you have to animate each object morphing into the next object." So it'd be things like a Christmas tree, and then you can do it in any order you want, but the Christmas tree has to then morph into something else. And that was a terrific test. And I can remember watching my animation move for the first time was incredible. To see my actually move, that was such an amazing feeling, just incredible. Actually, this is a 4-point answer, and the 4th point is very cutesy. So the third one, okay, this is also true, is that my harshest critic was my mother. Is my mother, not was, is my mother, okay? And I would show her my cartoons as a kid, and she'd always go, "Why do you have to be so violent? Why can't you do something nice?" Okay? And I'd always have to explain the joke to her. And one day I showed her a cartoon, a Psycho Gran cartoon, and she read it and she laughed, and I didn't have to explain it. And I said to her, "I might as well quit right now, because I'm never going to get better than this moment now. I've drawn a cartoon, you've read it, you've laughed, I haven't had to explain the joke. That's it. End of my career right now."
Yeah, that's amazing. That's definitely amazing.
And then the 4th, the silly cutesy one, is watching my children being born was just the best thing in the world. So and also no, not just that, but that's the best thing I've ever created. That's the best thing I've ever made. Those what's the to? So
co-made technically.
Well, yeah, I did all the hard work though.
What's your name too?
Oh my days! But yeah, so I mean that's just a silly thing at the end, but it is true. But in terms of that, I think that there's a certain sense of you never get over it. I think you shouldn't get over it. Is that sense of excitement of what you do? But you should only be as good as your every job you do should be better than what you've done before. And that's the thing I think is so important, is that you have to keep striving to get better each time. You can't rest on your laurels. You've got to keep pushing the envelope and keep getting better and better with each thing you do. Otherwise, there's no real point. There's no point being creative if you're not constantly trying to get better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
As soon as you stop and you just go through the motions, you miss it. I'm always amazed at people like Dan Barry, who drew Flash Gordon for 50 years. He did that strip. He did a daily newspaper strip for 50 years.
Yeah.
He hated it.
Why didn't he change then?
Well, because he couldn't. Because that's the thing. That's the thing. You get sucked into this stuff. He wanted to be a fine artist. He wanted to be respected as a fine artist. It's funny that we live in a world now where cartoonists are sort of like, aren't seen as being a crappy profession anymore. Like original artwork, can go for tens of thousands of pounds. But back when he was drawing it in the 50s, being a cartoonist was just like a pissant job. It was sort of like, it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And all that wonderful artwork that's been destroyed and lost because no one thought to keep it, It's terrible.
I know.
Terrible.
It's heartbreaking almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it is heartbreaking,
Yeah, talking about, obviously, comics again. We haven't really talked about Psycho Gran. Sorry for calling it Nan earlier.
Oh, my God.
I do apologise. But I have called you David, so
That's
know.
but then thank God for that, because if you'd called me anything other than David, I would have really let rip.
No, I do apologise for getting it wrong earlier, but
Don't worry.
Yeah, it was a slip of the tongue. But did you want to sort of tell the listeners about Psycho Gran? And what's going on with it all, sort of thing.
So I always tell people that Psycho Gran, she is the world's most violent granny. She's a 5 foot tall with a purple rinse, a pan-dimensional handbag, and a sentient purse who's also sentient called Percy, and she has a dog called Archie. And basically, Psycho Gran detests rudeness, and if you're rude to Psycho Gran, your days are probably numbered. And that's it, really. I mean, basically, it's an excuse for me to draw a little old lady causing absolute mayhem and havoc. Like I said, I do Psycho Gran verse where she beats up superheroes, and there's sort of like I always sort of. In fact, issue 1, the first page of issue 1 is her kicking Superman right in the genitalia, and he's being kicked out of his boots. And I do this whole thing. I always say, and here's Superman being kicked in the unmentionables, and he turned the page, and then there's I think Batman getting his nipples tweaked, and there's Batman with it being, what I try and do, and try and explain to people, and people don't quite get it, is that it's not just picking on people. I've got to think of like a secondary gag or something. So like Batman getting his nipples tweaked is a reference to Joel Schumacher's Batman with the nipples. So what it was actually Batman from the TV show, but having his nipples tweaked. So it's like it's that sort of thing. And then my favorite one, the one I sent you, was Psycho Gran versus the Alien, where kicking him so hard and his genitalia, his nuts are shooting out of his air vents. But for me, the funny thing was when I drew that gag. Initially, the gag was that the alien's tongue's extended, and he's got his little gangling waddling in his open. And I was on the telephone talking to someone, and I doodled in a pair of bollocks coming out of his air vents, and I burst out laughing because I didn't actually do that originally, and then I had to add them because I realised that's the joke.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is finding the joke. Is that sometimes the joke will come to you, and you don't see it coming. Sometimes you think the joke's one thing, and then you find it out. So basically, Psycho Gran is this incredibly vicious old lady. She's actually, I did once work out her origin, which is very messianic. It turns out that she's actually Eve. She's actually because no one ever finds out what happened to Eve. The idea is that Eve is Psycho Gran. She's the mother of us all. That's the idea.
Yeah.
And I wrote this story, which I'll never draw, which is basically the final ever Psycho Gran story. Which so I know how it ends. I'm very obsessed with cycles. I love cycles. So I came up with a story that has a beginning and a middle and an end. So basically, Psycho Gran is a series of one-off stories that range from 2 pages to 12 pages of her just being evil and maniacal. I've recently extended her family, so that there's I found out that she has a book club in her basement.
Yes, you sent me that one.
Yes, I like that one. That's Cthulhu, and I love the idea that basically in her basement lives Cthulhu and the other elder gods, and they sit around having a book club where they discuss 50 Shades of Grey. So I like that. So I do this thing, and it's basically just an excuse for me to sort of pick on people that annoy me. So I think victims in the past have included cyclist on the pavement. It's included a bag snatch. There was the man that talked in the cinema. That was quite grim. I love that. Also, one of the things I've been experimenting with. I'm fascinating about how horror and comedy are very closely connected. I love the fact that you can do an absolutely horrific story, just horrific, right? Just the most appalling thing. But if you make the reader laugh at the very end, you break the spell. So you can get, and I find that fascinating. So I did go through a phase of Psycho where I kept pushing the envelope. I did one that I was very proud of, where she invites 2 Jehovah's Witnesses into her house, and she basically poisons them and she paralyzes them. And they can't move, but they can still feel everything. And the story ends with her getting out this gigantic knife, just huge, horrific knife. And one of the Jehovah's Witnesses begs for his life, and he's got tears rolling down his face. And he says, please don't. I've got a child. And she goes, oh, what was I thinking? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And she turns around, she ushers her little doggy out the room, and she says, out you go now, Mummy's got to work. And then the door slowly closes on these 2 Jehovah's Witnesses screaming, and the door shuts, okay? And when it cuts, she's back in it. The whole story starts with her in a garden. The Jehovah's Witnesses come up to her, and they basically intimidate her in a garden. Why you're tending your garden? Have you considered the weeds growing in the garden of your soul? Oh, my heavens. So she's an old lady, and they're taking advantage of her. So at the end, she's back in a garden, and she's tending her roses. And this neighbor.
Sorry, I just very quickly interrupt. Sorry, because if you can hear a dog in the background, the door has just gone and our dog has just gone mental. So just in case you could hear it, so please continue. Sorry, I apologise.
That's the dog's fault. So basically, the punchline is that she's in her garden tending her roses, and her neighbor says, "Oh, Psycho, your roses are how lovely. However do you grow them?" And she says, "A nice meaty compost." So the idea is that so I kept pushing it. So I sent you the book club, which is the most horrific one I've done, where she basically lures 3 burglars into her basement, and they end up being the hors d'oeuvres in the book club.
Yeah,
and they all die horrifically. It was just because I wanted to see just how far I could push it. How far can you push this? And I remember David Lloyd was a bit concerned about it, and he sort of said to me, "This is supposed to be a family comic. I sort of get a bit worried about where you're going with this." I said, "Oh, don't worry, it'll all work out in the end." So and I had that whole gag about they've just murdered these 3 burglars, and then Psycho pulls out a bag of marshmallows and says, "Who fancies some toasted marshmallows?" It was just stupidness. So I do like, but I do like that. So I like to push how far I can go with Psycho. How far can I push the horror and still make it funny? I'm obsessed with making things funny. I love humor. I think you can convey so much information with humor. So I enjoy Psycho. Gives me a chance to do that, just to sort of experiment with that sort of the wickedness and evil. I find that very amusing.
Yeah, very good. No, and I really do enjoy, especially the ones that you sent me, because you sent me the images as well of like, Superman being hit and stuff, I was crying, laughing,
good.
looking for them. So,
that's the thing. So I those are all from her Psycho Gran versus books. So what I do in that as well is that it's about 22 pages worth of her beating people up. But then I've got a guest art section where I get various different guest artists to actually do their own versions of Psycho. And issue 3, I managed to get Liam Sharp to do me a Psycho Gran. So,
okay. Well, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah. And in previous ones, I've had Tom Mandrake, who's draws Spectre. He's done a Psycho Gran. It was Psycho Gran versus the Hulk. And I've had people like David Jones from Viz. He did one for me. Roger Language did one for me. Lou Stringer did one for me. Ryan Hughes. So I have guest art sections in the back where I basically con my friends into doing cartoons for me.
I think that's fair enough, isn't it?
I buy enough of their comics. So that's the 2 Psychos. So she's my actual first professional cartoon character. So I created her when Oink came out back in 1986, and she was the first time I created a brand new cartoon character for a national newspaper. So she's just, and also the weird thing about her is that people remember reading her. So she only appeared 15 times in Oink, and she appeared in the annual and also the summer special. People still remember her, which I find I'm very flattered that she should resonate. So, and I've met several new cartoonists whose work I absolutely love, who read her when they were growing up, and I find that very pleasing as well.
Oh, but it's lovely when it's sort of full circle, isn't it?
Absolutely, and once again, it's a circle, and I love circles.
Yes, circles are amazing.
They are. I like the way that they're round. That always appeals to me.
Yeah.
So, do you have any other questions? Does James have any other questions?
No, that was the only one from James that he I know. He's such a lazy git. The only other question that I had was with regards to, have you got any interesting, Comic-Con stories, or also what is San Diego Comic-Con like? Because I remember having this conversation with you at the London Film and Comic-Con, but yeah, I mean, I can remember, but it's just interesting to sort of know what it's like.
Okay. So I've got loads of stories. I tell you, way back in the day when there was just one comic convention in England every year, and it was UCAC, the United Kingdom Comic Art, UCAC, Comic Arts. Yeah. Comic Art.
That's a really nice name, isn't it? UCAC.
Yeah, UCAC. Yeah, that was great. And the very first one I ever went to was in 1986. I had to pay to go to it, right? That was the only convention I've ever paid to go to. The following year, I was a professional, and I never paid again to go to convention, which is I'm very pleased with that, because it was very important for me to achieve that distinction. I always wanted to be a professional cartoon, so I wanted to get paid for my work. So one of the wonderful things happened was back in the day when I was drawing The Driver. We went along to UCAC. I think it was either 88 or 89 when it was in Toxic, and we went along to the costume parade. And somebody came on stage dressed as the driver, and that was just fantastic feeling. It was like, oh wow!
Yeah.
I was really chuffed with that. I mean, it wasn't a difficult look to. You just had to be big, wear a white t-shirt, and have tattoos up and down your arms. But it's still someone went up to that, and people cheered and clapped. And I thought, oh, how!
And someone was inspired by your work as well, which is the most amazing part, isn't it?
Absolutely. I was very pleased with that one. So you wanted stories. So the other one I remember. which I still laugh at this one. So I was back in the day at UCAC. They would get all of the guests to line up, and they'd go up on stage one at a time, and they'd be introduced to all the guests. These were small conventions; they weren't big. And I can remember standing in line, and in front of me was this small American guy who was bald on top. He had quite a large curved nose, and he had hair above his ears, and he was American. Okay. And I suddenly realized that it was Will Eisner. Okay. And I was like, oh my God, it's Will Eisner. And I was instantly a fan. And I said, oh, Mr. Eisner, I just want to tell you, your artwork is remarkable. Hey, thanks, kid. That's great. Oh my God, it means so much to me. I said, I really apologize. Can I have your autograph? He goes, yeah, sure, kid, whatever you want. And all I had was the UCAC booklet. And I opened it, the first page I could. And I said, would you sign this? And he looked at it and he goes, but I didn't draw that. I said, I know, but I just want you to sign it. He goes, well, wouldn't you mind it? Wouldn't you prefer me to sign my own drawing? And so he turned to the page in the booklet that he drew, and then he signed it for me. But that was, I remember that, and that still makes you laugh because it was that one. I mean, you want stories about the conventions. I can remember mistaking Steve McManus with Mike McMahon, and that was very embarrassing. So I thought I was talking to Mike McMahon, but it was Steve McManus, and we still laugh about that, which is very cute. That was great. I remember meeting Mobius at a convention and having 10 minutes, just me and Mobius, and he spoke no English and I spoke no French, but it was still wonderful. And while I was talking to him, it was being translated, and he drew a picture for me in one of my Mobius books, and that was, I was near in tears. So I remember that. I mean, I love conventions. I love meeting. I mean, I'm lucky. I've made friends. I've got friends who are cartoonists, and so going to a UK convention, I get to meet people, they're friends, we meet up, we get together, we hang out. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
But really special stories. Back in, I think it was 2018, it might even been 2019, it might have been, George Lazenby went to the London Film and Comic Con. He was one of the main guests at London, and he was going into the green room, and I kept seeing him walking past my table, and he looked at my banner, and it said Psycho Gran, and he leaned across to one of his minders, and he went, I saw him, his lips, it said Psycho Gran, and I thought, oh, okay. And so he's in the green room. So I went into the green room and I got to talk to George Lazenby, just him and me, for 20 minutes. And it was incredible. All we did, I just listened to him talk about James Bond and talk about how he got the role and all that. And it was just the two of us, nobody else, just us talking about James Bond. And it was amazing. I cannot tell you how wonderful it was. And when it finished, I left the green room. And I said to him before I left, I said, look, I've really enjoyed this. I just got to tell you, though, and I suddenly forgot the name of his James Bond film, right? And I said, I've got to tell you, your James Bond film. And he went, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I went, yes. I said, I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites. And he said, well, you're very kind. Thank you very much. And I came out of there and I phoned my mum and I said, guess who I've just spoken to? And I was so chuffed to talk to George Lazenby. It was fantastic. So I've got loads of stories about meeting people and all sorts. It's been wonderful. I've loved it. What was San Diego like? San Diego was the most incredible, one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I said to you, it happened in 2019, which was, I consider, one of the best years of my life. I had a run, which was remarkable. I literally, in the space of 2 months, I did London Film and Comic Con. I then flew to San Diego. I then came back from San Diego. 1 week later, I went to Barbados. I came back from Barbados, and 2 weeks later, I was in New York. It was just incredible. Okay,
that's insane, isn't it?
It was. But but San Diego, nothing can prepare you for San Diego if you've never been.
No.
The scale of it is, I mean, like, you've been to London Film and Comic Con, okay?
Yeah.
I love London Film and Comic Con, okay? It's big. It's nothing. You can walk from one end of SDCC, San Diego Comic Con, okay? You walk in the main hall, one end to the other end. It'll take you 20 minutes to walk the length of that. When that convention is up and running, it will take you 40 minutes to get from one end to other. There are so many people. That's just for one floor, okay? Everywhere you look, it is just 100,000% pure comics, okay? It is astonishing. And I was there as part of Titan, and we had a booth there, and we were selling stuff. And I was selling stuff. This is when Blade Runner 2019 launched, and so I was doing panels. I was interviewed for TV. I was doing panels. I was rushing here, rushing there. I ended up doing an impromptu portfolio review for 3 hours, standing up with a queue that never diminished, with just people showing me their portfolios for 3 hours. I couldn't work out why it wasn't stopping. It's because somebody was tweeting that I was doing a portfolio reviews, and all the artists came rushing to me.
Okay.
We were doing 12-hour days. Okay, we would get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we wouldn't leave until 8 o'clock in the evening. We were absolutely hammered. I've got flat feet. My feet were in so much agony, I can't tell you. Every night I would crawl into bed and pass out. No. Listen, it was fantastic. I do not regret a single solitary second. Okay, I have never worked as hard as I did that. We were there for a week. We put together the stand. We put everything out. We closed the stand down. We collapsed the whole thing. But every single day, all of us, it wasn't just me. There was a whole team of us. And it was fantastic. San Diego is a beautiful city. And that convention was like, it's like if I was a Muslim, it was like going to Mecca. It was so incredible that it's an experience I can still vividly remember. I loved it. It was beyond, nothing compares to it. And then I did New York Comic Con, and New York Comic Con is a completely different animal. It's still big. It's in the Lincoln. Is it Lincoln? It's in this huge center in it might be Lincoln. There's a huge center in New York, and it's vast. It's massive. It's not as big as San Diego, but it's still massive.
Yeah.
And that was pure. That was really hard work. San Diego, there was a real sense of fun and excitement, but New York was brutal. That was really hard work. I loved it just as much, but I enjoyed San Diego more. San Diego was just was fantastic. One of the great things about San Diego, we went on our last day. We went for a boat trip across the bay, and that was amazing. Racing on, but then in New York, on the last day in New York, we went round. We just went on a walking tour of New York, and we took a boat ride, and that was honestly, it was just amazing. It was amazing. So those conventions, the thing about them is that I think I might have mentioned, if I haven't, I'm surprised, that I genuinely love comics, and so being in an environment where you're selling them and you're talking to people and it's just incredible. It's such it's just exhilarating. And we also had to do this thing that two of us had to present. We had to present to all of the comic shops of America. We had to present all of the Titan material. And so we did a whole routine where we got them singing and dancing. And that was amazing too. You know, there was, that was just great fun. It was just that sort of stuff. There was so many good things about it, and it was so hard work, but it was wonderful.
Yeah,
that's it.
And
that's it.
Yeah, hard work, but it was worth it.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and then oh my days, just a beautiful. Like I said, one of the best years of my life, and that's the reason why San Diego and New York Comic Con.
Good. And of course, meeting me at London Film and Comic Con. Of course,
that's third. That meeting you was even beats my 30th wedding anniversary. And we had a hog roast for that. Actually, I'm not a huge one. I don't like parties, but I've got to say our wedding anniversary, we did a karaoke, and it was one of those sort of things that it could have gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But it was just sensational. Everybody at the end, everybody was up and singing, and everybody that came, and it was just so much fun. It was great.
That's how parties should be, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just having a good laugh.
Good laugh and a hog roast.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
That's it. I was absolutely made up.
Yeah. Well, with regards to like social media and things like that, where can people find you and buy your comics and what?
Well, they can reach out. I mean, obviously I'm on Facebook, but I don't when it's David Leach on Facebook, I don't tend to interact with people. But you can reach me on Psycho Gran's Facebook page. So she's got her own Facebook page. You'll actually find on her Facebook things, you'll find her comics and the Psycho Gran verses. If you want to buy them, please do. Everything's £5, and post and packaging is I think about £2. It's not a lot. It's just an envelope and all that sort of stuff. So I'm more than happy to sell anything to anybody. You can buy my autobiographical comic. There's 2 issues at the minute, but there will be a third out this year. There's 3 issues of Psycho Gran verses. So yeah, I'm always reachable there. You'll even find me on Twitter if you're clever enough. I don't tend to hide. I am there. It just when it comes to my own Facebook page, I get sent Facebook requests all the time, but I only accept those from people I know. I don't accept and even if we've got 50 people in common, it's not a good enough reason for me to
Yeah.
I've got to have met you and want to be a Facebook friend, basically.
Yeah. I get that. I get that because there is times when I look through all of my Facebook friends and I think, should really go for the cull list.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Because
I keep thinking that, but I never get round to it.
yeah, no, me neither. So, other than for like the podcast and stuff, I don't really go on Facebook that much anyway. So it's mainly our page that I kind of go on for. So, you know, I think the rest of it I don't really pay attention to. But
So where are you on social media? Are you just on Twitter then?
no, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook,
Ah.
and it's at Codswallop Pod for all of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You don't put yourself on it then? Just Swallow.
Yeah, no, I'm on Facebook as a personal account, but yeah, the other two. I used to have my own personal Twitter, but then to be honest, I used to use the podcast one so much that I thought, well, what's the point in having the other one?
Absolutely.
I never used it, so I just shut that one down. Well, I think it's shut down. It might still be out there. Who knows?
The one. So I've got an Instagram account I can't close down, which is very irritating because I can't remember the password.
Oh no! Can you not just change it?
No, I've tried, but I'm on. I recently I used to have. In fact, it's the same one. I had an Instagram account. I'd never posted anything, but I had over 500 followers, but I'd never posted anything. And I just thought, what's going on here? And I started going through my followers, and it was all porn sites or, hi, I want to be your friend. I thought, oh God. So I got rid of that one. But I've recently joined Instagram. I put my photos on Instagram. So I'm there. I think that's David Leach 2001, I think. And I put my photos on those. So if you want to check out my photos, pop them on Instagram.
Yeah, I think Instagram is a good platform for artists. So
yeah, I'm beginning to see it. I got friends who can actually make money out of it, which I find quite interesting. You know, they sell stuff. I haven't quite worked out how to do that yet. I think I need to get more followers. I've only got 80 odd followers so far.
Okay, well, I'll try and find you later, and I'll follow you.
Good luck, Gemma.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Well, thank you ever so much for taking the time to record this episode with me. I've really felt like I've had more of an understanding of your lifestyle and things like that. So yeah, it's been really interesting.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it too. It's been nice talking to you. Thank you.
It's been lovely. So in that case then, I think we've been talking enough Codswallop this week. I have been Gemma.
I've been David Leach.
Yes, he has. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And go out and buy his comics already.
Yes, please.